All right, so things continue to intensify, to say the least. Two LAPD were ambushed last night. I heard they're in critical condition. And the reason why I keep bringing this kind of stuff up is exactly what I've been saying all along, is that the problem is only going to get worse until people start to realize what the real problem is. And what the real problem is isn't systemic racism and all this kind of stuff that they really can't point to actual examples of. Um, but the problem being is that we have one side that's trying to fix a problem that fundamentally doesn't exist. Or I think a better way of putting it is it exists, but it's on such a small scale that it's not something that should be talked about nearly as much as it is, right? Like, racism definitely exists to some degree, but it's not anywhere close to as bad as what BLM or a lot of these mainstream media outlets would have you think, right? And the simple, I mean, there's many ways of knowing that. Like I say, number one, the numbers just don't back it up either. I've been over that a million times. Number two is that if racism was such a huge issue, well, why can't they give us actual examples, right? Like the best examples they can give us of racism as of late is a guy who was a violent criminal who got killed because he was violently resisting arrest, going for a knife, and a guy who died of a drug overdose, right? Like the knee on the neck had nothing to do with George Floyd's killing, and that's not my opinion. That's the medical examiners, what the medical examiner said. And again, when George Floyd first happened, I said, yeah, this looks pretty bad, but the evidence has since came out that has completely disproven that. And I think the other thing too is that it's no longer just a political thing too. Like, for the longest time, when there was political issues that were polarizing, we kept it within the realm of politics. Now it's involved in people's day-to-day lives. Like sports has gone completely woke. Even the ones that, hockey that you didn't used to be woke has gone woke. There's roving bands of people, marching around demanding you submit to their cult. Like people are getting fired. Like this is going to continue to get worse and worse until people um, admit the truth. And that the problem is that we've gone so far off the deep end that that's probably not going to happen without a massive tipping point and a lot of pain and suffering. And that is the big problem. Like we've gone so far off the tipping point that's probably never going to happen, and that's something that's really sad. And this is the problem too, that protesters blocked the emergency room exit, saying we hope they die. Like again, this is the big problem, that these people, again, whether this is something that people always bring up. Oh well, BLM is pretty bad, but they once had good intentions. Like again, good intentions at this point don't matter. And first of all, I don't think they ever had good intentions, given the fact that their founders are, a lot of them are Marxists and open about it. So you pretty much know by default, if that's the case, they never had good intentions. But nonetheless, that doesn't matter anymore. Like that doesn't matter. They are literally directly killing people, or at the very least, causing this kind of stuff to happen, right? They're causing this kind of stuff to happen. And this is the problem too, that things are going to, they still think they're right. Like every one of these people thinks they're in the right. And this is the problem too, that they're going to keep pushing it further and further and further. Like again, this is exactly what I've been saying and other people have been saying. First it's protesting, then they get violent, then people justify the violence, and the minute that happened, that's when things got crazy, right? Because the minute the mainstream media and largely the Democrats and the Liberals and the NDP in Canada, the minute the fact that they're justifying almost all of it, to be honest, that gave them carte blanche to do pretty much whatever they want. They've been showing up at people's houses, they've been being violent. And again, it's like I say, this is going to get worse and worse and worse until people wake up to. And the problem is that I think it's going to have to reach a tipping point before that happens. And what that tipping point is, I don't know. But it could be civil war, over again, right? And that'll get very bad. And not to mention too, I think the goal is to blame Trump on a lot of this kind of stuff too. So that's another aspect of it. But nonetheless, that's the first thing I wanted to bring up today. Um, the next thing I wanted to bring up is from City News Toronto. And again, this is something I kind of brought up yesterday, but I wanted to get into it a little bit more. And they say Prime Minister Trudeau says the federal government began preparing for a possible pandemic as soon as it first received the first alert about a mysterious cluster of pneumonia cases in China on New Year's Eve. And that doesn't make any sense. Right? Like, that doesn't make any sense for the simple reason that um, if they knew about it and they had forewarning about it, then why didn't they prepare for it better? And this is the thing too that Mark Peralvis points out here. Is a good follow if you don't follow him, but nonetheless he say, but sent all our PPE to China in February. Again, if you knew that this was a threat, then why in the world would you get rid of our PPE? It doesn't make any sense. So if either they didn't have forewarning and they're just straight up lying about this, or they did, and they're so incompetent that they sent all of our PPE to China, or not all of it, but a very good chunk of it, right? And not to mention, we didn't even get anything for it in return. I don't think so. Yeah, it's rather insane that people, and this is the thing too. This is where the whole CBC 88% of Canadians support the way the government handled this. No, like I say, for starters, that's not even possible, right? Because the government, the way they're handling it now, is radically different than the way they're handling it at the start. So again, if you approve of the way they're handling it now, then you didn't approve of the way they're handling it at the start. And if you approved of it at the start, you don't approve of the way they're doing it now, right? So, or you don't approve of any of it. I mean, those are the three options, right? So for all the mask, zealots out there, yeah, if you support that, well, you don't support the government because they told us not to wear masks at the start of this. And if you don't support masks, well, then you don't support it because they told you, or if you don't, then but yeah, because they're forcing us to do it now. I mean, so anyway, like I said, and that's just one example, but nonetheless, yeah, this is just straight up fake news, like straight up fake news, and it's not possible, right? It's not possible because again, if there was this massive worry that they were warned about in December or January, then why would they get rid of a vast, a large supply of our PPE, right? It doesn't make any sense. Not to mention too, why were they not closing the borders? Like I say, it doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. And this is from Bear Jerry on Twitter here, and he says, 123 children found in Michigan sounds to me like Maxwell singing like a canary. Now, again, do we know for sure that it's Ghislaine Maxwell that is the reason for all these recent discoveries and arrests and whatnot? No, but it's probably too much of a coincidence to think otherwise. So yeah, that's probably something that important to point out. But nonetheless, yeah, this is something that should be in the news a lot more. Like seriously, why is it not more in the news? Like why is it not more in the news? It doesn't make any sense. And the simple reason too is that the mainstream media doesn't really care, right? Because um, they're more worried about just blindly supporting the establishment usually, and um, you know their ratings basically, right? Like defend the establishment, and whatever we need to report, it has to be good for ratings, right? That's pretty much their thoughts on things. And again, like I said, this should be way bigger news. Like some career criminal dies of a drug overdose, and it's the biggest news in the world for like a month. And another violent criminal gets killed for being a violent criminal, or not gets killed, but almost gets killed. Um, and that's massive news as well. But this is local news. Like the only place you see it's on Twitter, maybe local outlets. Like, come on, this is insane. And again, it's just more and more evidence that the mainstream media is complete fake news, like the vast majority of it. So, yeah. The last thing I wanted to bring up is something I brought up as well. So the CCFR had their Integrity March yesterday in Ottawa, and it was a very good showing. Again, the mainstream media downplayed it as usual, or as expected. I mean, and you mean the anti-gunners were out on social media complaining, doing their usual straw manning and whatnot. And I mean that's the thing too. Like I mean, the one good thing that's coming out of this is that it is awakening Canadian gun owners and Canadians who care about freedom in general, that everything can be taken at the drop of a hat, and for no reason either. Like there was no reason for this. Like the government, they didn't really directly bring up the whole Nova Scotia shooting, at least from what I remember. Um, but they kind of imply that, right? Like they kind of imply that, oh, this would have stopped that killing, even though it wouldn't have. Number one, because he killed a lot of the people by burning them to death, and number two, all of his guns were illegal. And even if they weren't, I mean, he was dressed up as a cop. You could have killed people in many ways if you were dressed up as a cop, right? So it couldn't have, but again, most people, because they implemented the ban right after that, they just kind of draw that conclusion, right? Oh, yeah, they did it because of the Nova Scotia shooting, and it would have stopped the Nova Scotia shooting. Like, no, it really wouldn't have. It really wouldn't have. Um, so anyway, yeah, that's very, very, very good that they're doing this kind of stuff. Like I said, the one good thing that is coming of this is the pro-gun movement in Canada it has been awoken. I think a lot of Canadians. I mean, this is something too I really can't stand about Canadians. Even the pro-gun Canadians, the whole like how we mock Americans for being patriotic and stuff. Like, why is that a bad thing? Like, seriously, why is that? I mean, not to mention too, Americans are less and less patriotic by the day now, it seems, but still, nonetheless, why are we doing that? Like, seriously, why are we doing that? It doesn't make any sense. And that's the thing too, is that at least they have some rights left in the states. Like, we're losing stuff by the day in Canada. I mean, they're losing a lot in the states too, but at least we have something left, or sorry, at least they have something left there. Like, at least you have a decent amount of gun rights there. But I mean, Canada, we don't have free speech. We're within an inch of losing pretty much all guns. And again, that's another thing to bring up too for anybody who actually thinks differently. Like, again, these people are very open and honest. They want to ban pretty much all guns. I mean, the one caveat they always throw out is, "Oh, we'll let you have the hunting rifles," but um, the one thing that they always bring up is, "Oh, you don't need that to hunt." Well, their line of thinking is, "Oh, you only need guns for hunting." But then the line of thinking they'll have is, "Oh, you live in, the suburbs, or you don't actually need to hunt, right? Like, you only need a gun if you actually physically need to hunt, right? And that's only for people that live in really rural areas." So then they'll take away the bolt actions and the pump actions because, oh, you don't actually need it, right? Like, that's the problem, is that if they keep getting their way, everything will be gone. Like, literally everything will be gone. So yeah, for anybody who isn't already, I mean, if you can support them financially, do that for sure. I would strongly suggest that. But if you can't, at the very least, follow them on Twitter, follow them on all the social media platforms, like and share their stuff. Like, that's at the bare minimum what everybody needs to be doing. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check me out on Twitter, on BitChute, and on Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.